Chapter 21 of Ambulancing on the French Front. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Betty B. Ambulancing on the French Front by Edward R. Coyle. Eyes of the Army. All military observation balloons are practically the eyes of the Army. They are generally captive, always out of reach of enemy artillery fire. Of course, they may become the victims of surprise attacks from enemy aviators. These sausage-shaped craft are very important adjuncts to the fighting forces, and they have regular habits. They go up every morning and come down every night. In this they are aided by the engine of some large auto truck which hauls them in or lets them go up, according to orders from the officer in charge. Their efficiency as posts of observation may be readily appreciated. There is nothing going on below for miles upon miles that cannot be distinguished through the use of powerful glasses in the hands of skilled lookout men. With these fellows on watch very little can transpire that they are not likely to discover in a jiffy. The enemy tries to send a wagon train of ammunition to some point of advantage, when, bingo, some shells explode in their path. Then it's a case of jumping and running for their lives. Troop movements are subject to the same kind of attack. In fact, everything is an open book to the trained observers, lolling about in the high altitude breezes, alert, however, to every little thing going on. It is most interesting to watch the work of the observation balloon, which always anchors close enough to the front to give it the advantage of seeing everything, yet far enough to the rear to protect it from being shot at by the enemy anti-aircraft batteries. It depends upon the contour and character of the ground and at just what elevation the balloon officials can best observe. The great bag is held in place by a steel cable and has direct telephone communication with the artillery field station. This station is located so that all wires from the observation posts lead into it, as do also the wires from the field batteries along certain parts of the front. When anything transpires that seems of enough consequence to deserve a few shells, the observer phones the location as it appears on his chart, and a corresponding chart at the Artillery Bureau furnishes correct information to the officers in charge, as though they were looking at the very spot themselves. The range is computed and phoned to the battery that commands the particular location of the objective. The range is soon found and the firing begins. It is then the duty of the gas bag observers to inform the Bureau the moment a shell explodes, setting forth the information that is necessary for corrections in the event that the shell missed, also whether it exploded before reaching the object or passed beyond. The moment this information is secured, corrections in the range are immediately made, phoned to the battery, and the second shell is sent screaming on its way. After which corrections are again given until finally the observer comes back with the word hit. They then have the range and can hammer away at the position until they have completed the necessary destruction. So accurate has this system become that with an observation balloon to govern and observe artillery fire, after the second and third shot will come uncomfortably close to its objective if it does not make a direct hit. The accuracy of cannon fire nowadays is remarkable, and although batteries may be located in clumps of trees or even hidden by hills, they have reached a perfection almost beyond belief. Thus it may be readily seen that the observation balloon plays an important part in modern warfare. Because of these observation balloons, there has seldom been, if ever, such a thing as concentrations of large bodies of troops for attacking purposes, or unending streams of caissons bringing up shells or supplies without coming under the eye of the observer. One day on the Eastern Front, an artillery commander in our division started out on a tour of inspection. He arrived at a certain position where a new battery was being located in a clump of woods just off the roadside. In preparation for the new battery, some concrete work was being done on foundations. Pulling up on the road in a clearing, the officer and his aide stepped out of the car, followed by the chauffeur, and entered the woods to review the work. At a distance, so small that it could scarcely be seen, was a German observation balloon. The party had no sooner entered the woods when they were attracted by the explosion of a shell in close proximity. This was soon followed by a second, which landed in the road, and then a third, which struck beside the front end of the auto they had just left and blew it into fragments. One thing that comes under the eye of a person traveling along the military roads in France is the large number of soup kitchens that lie toppled over along the roadside. The reason for this is that there are always so many of these soup kitchens going to and from the front along roads that can be seen from enemy observation balloons, and they can be shelled with deadly and unerring accuracy. It is a most rare occurrence for the drivers of these soup kitchens to be injured or wounded, for they can hear the shell coming and dive off of the kitchens into the roadside or run for their lives. Meanwhile, the shell will make a direct hit and blow the soup kitchen to pieces. Observation balloons are a hindrance to operations that the enemy desire to be unobserved. Therefore, aviators are dispatched against them and instructed to clear them from the skies. Of course, there is no means by which an observation balloon can resist successfully an attack by an aviator, even if equipped with a machine gun, because the aviator will always attack it from above. The best opportunity to destroy observation balloons always comes on cloudy days, when an aviator can circle around in the clouds until he gets directly over the balloons, and drop unobserved upon it. Then, with a machine gun or an incendiary bomb, he can put it out of existence. When the observers see that they cannot get away from the enemy aviator, their only chance is to jump from the basket with a parachute. As the moment the bomb strikes the gas bag and the contents ignite, it becomes an inferno. Two interesting incidents took place at Verdun in connection with observers and enemy aeroplanes after their gas bags had been struck and destroyed. In the first instance, the observer jumped from the basket and was descending toward the earth, suspending and swinging at the end of a parachute, like the pendulum of a clock. The enemy aviator, for additional exercise and excitement, circled around and descended along with the parachute, shooting at the observer as he swung through the air with his machine gun until he got his man. But in so doing he descended closer to the ground than he had contemplated doing, and a well-directed shot from an anti-aircraft battery brought both himself and his plane tumbling to the earth. The second instance was where a Boche aviator had dropped out of the clouds, and an observer, seeing there was no chance to get away from him, quickly jumped from the basket of his balloon with a parachute. The bag was struck shortly after and burst into flames. It must have been the intention of the Boche to have some machine gun exercise with this observer, for he circled around and tried to get into a position to fire. Before he could accomplish this, the observer, swinging through the air, drew an automatic revolver and with a well-directed shot hit the aviator and killed him. Observation balloon work is considered a very dangerous branch of the service, inasmuch as observers do not have an opportunity to protect themselves from enemy aviators and must rely chiefly on anti-aircraft batteries for protection. End of chapter 21.
Chapter 21 of Ambulancing on the French Front. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Ambulancing on the French Front by Edward R. Coyle. Anti-aircraft batteries. Located all along the front are batteries which consist principally of French cannon that we have heard so much about, known to the world as 75s. While this type is most frequently used, there are some aircraft batteries of larger caliber, known as the 105s. The reason that these two types of guns are used exclusively is due to their flexibility. They can be changed to different angles and elevations and be fired with the rapidity so necessary in following an aeroplane in flight. Aircraft batteries are always located where protection is necessary from aviators in the rear of the lines, also in the event of the enemy aviator being able to get by the batteries up front. The guns are mounted over a pit on a revolving platform that can complete a circle. Counterweights are attached to the gun for elevation so that it can be changed quickly from the horizontal to very near a 90-degree angle, the direction, of course, being obtained by the shifting of the revolving platform. Some very novel contrivances have been developed for computing ranges, and each aircraft battery uses every available device that is likely to assist them in making flying uncomfortable for the Boches. Where there are 2 or more of these batteries, they are connected up with each other by telephone, and, as an enemy flyer comes within range of their guns, the angles are phoned back and forth, and with this knowledge they can make the location untenable, even if they do not bring the flyer down. I have seen many an enemy flyer get into these pockets and rejoice at the moment he discovered the trap that there were some clouds close by into which he could dodge and get away with his skin intact. These planes are, in most instances, observation planes, either to see what is transpiring behind the lines or to take photographs of enemy positions. The bombing planes work mostly under cover of darkness, which enables them to come down much closer to earth. To meet this condition, there is located at each aircraft battery a device known as an audiphone. It is a large box-shaped affair, made of sheet metal about 36 inches square. Inside are fastened 4 small cones, in appearance much like Victrola horns. These are, in turn, connected with a vibrator similar to that in an ordinary telephone receiver. To this are attached 2 rubber tubes, identical with the instrument used by doctors called a stethoscope, for listening to the heart. This equipment is fastened to a post and can be turned in any direction. The box-shaped device, working on a common axle, can be elevated or lowered at will. When an aviator is in the air, a lookout places the 2 hard rubber tubes to his ears and turns the equipment in the general direction of the supposed location. He then elevates and lowers the box-shaped device until he arrives at a position where the clearest motor vibrations are received, the post being marked off in degrees, like the revolving gun platform. The arrow on the audiphone points to the degree indicated on the post, and thus the direction is obtained and the gun trained at the same degree. Then there is a second arrow with a scale corresponding to the one upon which the gun is elevated. When the clearest vibrations come in, the angle at which the box rests is indicated, and this in turn is copied by the gun. The distance is estimated by the strength of the vibrations coming in on the receiving instrument. The general location is phoned to the searchlight stations, and the light is projected to afford the batteries observation in the event that the aviator changes the direction of his flight after the first shot is fired. These projectors in many instances depend, of course, upon the locations where the greatest aerial activities take place. Run up as high as 4½ feet in size, and with 3 or 4 searchlights playing into the heavens, it is very easy to discern an aeroplane, unless it is flying very high. The French 75s make a wonderful anti-aircraft gun that, with the remarkable perfection that gunners have attained, ensures an enemy aeroplane quite a warm reception. But, at best, machines brought down by either side by anti-aircraft guns are very few, for no matter how good the marksmanship, the aeroplane always has the advantage. He can take to higher levels quickly, and the higher his elevation, the greater his security. When a shot is fired at him in a certain position, he knows that it will be from 8 to 18 seconds before the projectile will reach his elevation. By merely changing his course in a fast machine, 4 or 5 seconds will take him 300 or 400 feet away from the bursting shell. But the frequency of direct hits in lower altitudes does not warrant aviators taking chances. They'd better be on their way. End of chapter 21. Read by Christine Lehman, Reseda, California. Chapter 22 of Ambulancing on the French Front. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Ambulancing on the French Front by Edward R. Coyle. Hand grenade work. There are two kinds of hand grenades, offensive and defensive. The first is employed in all offensive operations, and to explain its use more clearly it is well to start with the bombers, popularly known as the Suicide Club. Before an attack is made, in most instances, a barrage fire is put over on the enemy trenches, and the length of this preparation depends on the extent of the offensive and on the area over which it spreads. The purpose of this barrage fire is to blast out of existence all of the enemy machine guns on the parapet of the trenches that are to be attacked. It must be understood that with a heavy barrage fire on their front-line positions, the enemy would be unable to keep many men in readiness at the guns, and the machine guns themselves would be endangered if they were left exposed. Therefore, they take to the dugouts with guns and all other equipment. Chosen from the regiments, there are certain men known as bombers, who are ready, at a specified time, with another kind of equipment, a large basket-shaped pocket swinging at their waists, filled with hand grenades. They are always ready in the front-line trench to go over at the time set by the command. The barrage fire still plays on the enemy lines when the bombers charge across no man's land. It is their task to keep the enemy and their machine guns in their dugouts so that they cannot drag them to the parapets of the trenches for use against the infantry, which invariably follows the bombers over the top. The grenade used by the bombers in an offensive of this kind is a trifle larger than a good-sized lemon. Projecting from one end is a pin on which there is a touch button. Touch the button, and the pin does the rest. It ignites a fuse on the end of which is an explosive cap, similar in design to the caps we use in this country for dynamite blasting. The cap sets off the charge, which is supposed to be one of the most powerful and deadliest of explosives. The shell of the grenade is corrugated into little squares that break up and fly in all directions when the charge is exploded, and covers a large area on its mission of destruction. Much care and skill is required of the bomber, since he must be able to throw a grenade with great accuracy and always far enough to keep himself from being injured. There is a common notion abroad that bombs are thrown like baseballs, but this idea is erroneous. The method employed is radically different. Grenades are timed so that they go off quickly after reaching their objective, and within 5 seconds of the time when the first throwing motion is made and the time fuse is going. During the early part of the war, the moment a grenade was started fusing, it was the desire of the bomber to get it on its way as quickly as possible. The Germans noticed that the grenades did not go off for several seconds after they landed, and, in many instances, picked them up and hurled them back. Many of our men were killed in this way before they learned to measure the time accurately. All along the front, in back of the lines, are fields where one may see companies of men practicing daily with grenades. Their work is a most important factor in modern warfare, as the defenders of a trench rely chiefly on their machine guns to resist infantry attacks. Should the bombers contrive to hold the enemy in their dugouts, their own infantry can cross over without having to face a death-dealing stream of bullets that would be poured into them by 3 or 4 machine guns. Illustration: awaiting orders behind the front. Strange to say, of all the men making up the different branches of service around base and army hospitals, one rarely ever sees a maimed bomber. It is one thing or the other with these fellows. They come back whole or not at all. A most dangerous work is that of the bomber, as he is always the first to go over, and, of course, offers a tempting mark for whatever machine guns are not in the dugouts but remain on the parapets of an enemy trench. Defensive grenades have a different classification and are employed in a distinctive way. Any or all infantrymen of an army may be equipped with this form of grenade. They are made on a principle diametrically opposite to that of the offensive grenade. The best of these are manufactured by an English concern and are very reliable. The element of danger in its operation is very slight. They are used principally for the destruction of barbed wire entanglements, in order that infantrymen may make a quick passage over no man's land. Should one of these grenades land alongside of a post supporting the enemy barbed wire, the explosion which follows is so tremendous that it will shatter that post into bits, causing all of the wire to drop to the ground. This will afford enough gaps to make passage free and easy. The defensive grenade is vastly different in structure and function, as the jacket containing the charge is a tin composition, very light in construction, so that every particle of force will be effective at a given point, without the necessity of having to break through a heavy iron shell. Just enough weight is used in the body of this type. It is devoid of the pin and the button, but has a handle held in place by a cotter pin on the end of which is a ring. When the ring is pulled, it draws the cotter pin from the locking device on the body of the grenade, which holds the handle in a safe position. Before the pin is pulled, the bomber must have the handle clamped down securely in the palm of his hand with the grenade, for the moment the handle is allowed to fly up, the grenade begins fusing and must be thrown. As long as the handle is held securely in its original position, even though the pin be drawn, it is harmless. It is, however, ready for service in the fraction of a second, and makes an ideal defensive weapon for instant use. It can be thrown directly in front of a man rushing at you with a bayonet, and it will blow him into fragments. At the same time, there will be perfect security to the one who launches it, but at 5 times the distance, an offensive grenade would prove a boomerang. For cutting down enemy barbed wire, there is nothing so effective except heavy artillery, which can compare with this high explosive hand grenade for terrific power of destruction. There is a newer form of grenade now in use, which is fired from a regular rifle. An attachment like a cylinder is fastened to the barrel of the rifle, and a regulation cartridge inserted into the cartridge chamber, as when it is to be ordinarily fired. Then a grenade is placed in the cylinder, and the gun is discharged while held at the height of the waistline, the muzzle being elevated or lowered according to the distance the grenade is to be thrown. There is a gauge showing where the grenades will approximately strike at different elevations of the muzzle, and it is surprising with what accuracy they will reach their objective. This method is used where the distance is too great for throwing by hand. The ball, when fired, passes down the rifle barrel and through the grenade, striking a contact spring, which starts it fusing. The gas from the explosion of the powder in the chamber forms the propelling power. A great many other contrivances are used for the launching of grenades, such as various forms of spring traps. The French have a pneumatic device, a cylinder in which the grenade is placed, and the pressure for launching it is produced by means of a pump, not unlike in design that of the automobile tire pump. All these different devices, while serving a purpose, do not meet all requirements as effectively as does the grenade which is launched by hand. It is a most dangerous missile and hard to get away from. One serious danger to which consideration must be given, and into which Americans are apt to be tempted, is the collection of souvenirs of war. All along the front one sees many things that are of interest, unexploded shells, hand grenades, and the like. The inexperienced, unsuspecting the danger of such things, are tempted to pick them up and examine them. This has caused many a death. It is a risk that should never be taken, for it is only another way of courting death. Not every shell or grenade that is sent over explodes, and many actually lie intact for days, only to explode at some slight disturbance. One only needs to observe the French, who are familiar with all angles of the game through their 3½ years' experience, to learn what they think about tampering with shell heads. A regular corps of men, appointed generally from some artillery battery, make it their duty to look after unexploded shells, either by setting them off, or by carting them away and burying them, likewise unexploded hand grenades. These are collected and buried, but many an experienced man has come to his death while clearing up roads and fields of these unexploded missiles. There have been instances known on different fronts where the Germans have "fixed" everything they leave on the field, allowing shells and grenades to lie there for someone to pick up. An attractive officer's helmet might catch one's eye, and appear to be just about the most harmless thing in the world, but to touch it more than likely means death. End of chapter 22. Read by Christine Lehman, Reseda, California.
Chapter 24 of Ambulancing on the French Front. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Betty B. Ambulancing on the French Front by Edward R. Coyle. The American Y.M.C.A. An honest confession is said to be good for what ails you, mentally and physically. So here goes with reference to my erstwhile ignorance concerning that great and growing organization known to all the world as the Young Men's Christian Association. I'll admit my prejudice. It goes back to the days when I invented every possible excuse to keep from going to Sunday school. And so when I arrived at maturity, I found myself shying toward the outer curbing every time. I used to pass quickly these quiet, orderly buildings, fearful that someone would rush out and thrust a lesson leaflet into my hand. Once I had a friend who, when in earnest conversation, would halt occasionally to point his long forefinger and say, "Listen to the truth." And that's the kind of a gesture and the exact words that I would use now if I should find it necessary to raise my voice in defense of the Y.M.C.A. I'll never forget the first one I visited. I was in Paris on leave of absence, along with another young man in the same service as myself. He suggested a visit to the Y.M.C.A., and so far as my pleasure was concerned, he might just as well have suggested the morgue. The motion was carried, however, and I found myself being jostled along, speechless with disgust for having come all the way from the front line trenches to waste my time at such a tame sort of a place. Visions of being met at the door with a bundle of tracts and a pocket Bible came into my mind's eye, but on the theory that it never pays to be a joy killer, I said nothing. In less time than it takes to tell it, I found myself the worst fooled mortal of my age and weight among all my numerous friends and acquaintances. Our taxicab drew up in front of a palatial building, which I recognized as our destination, for I did know the triangular flag of the Y.M.C.A. We entered a large open court where were several small tables and chairs, reasons for which we learned afterwards. Ascending a grand stairway, we arrived at the second floor, or club room. At once two gentlemen stepped forward with a cheerful "Hello, boys," and invited us to make ourselves quite at home. Almost immediately thereafter we were taken in tow and escorted around the place. At this moment I glanced at the peculiar expression on my friend's face. We had been there 5 minutes, and no one had handed either of us a Bible, which seemed most surprising to me. There were spacious lounging rooms, with big easy chairs, and tables heaped with books and magazines; also writing rooms, smoking rooms, victrolas, pianos, billiard and pool tables, just as you find them in a genuine American club. It reminded me of good old New York with all of its comforts and ease. The atmosphere was that of wholesome refinement, with a welcome in every face that beamed our way. Our escorts informed us that things were not exactly in shape as yet, but would be in full running order very shortly. For a place that was not in working trim, I wondered what could be done to make it more complete. I was soon to learn that its growth since the war began had been phenomenal. It had become the principal rendezvous for the army boys, a home indeed, to which they could come at any time, day or night, and get good hot baths and clean up. I was completely surprised, for in Paris, at the finest hotels, such a thing was impossible, except on Saturdays and Sundays, because of the conservation of fuel. Then, too, the Y.M.C.A. had established a Bureau of Tobacco, where the boys could obtain American cigarettes and cigars at a cost which was much less than they could be bought even at home. The French government would not allow cigarettes to be sent to the boys in service unless the duty, which was prohibitive, was paid on them. One has to have but a single experience with "army issue," the name applied by the boys to the tobacco passed out to soldiers, to know what a big satisfaction it is to be able to walk up to the counter of the Y.M.C.A. with the feeling of ease one feels in going into one's hometown favorite cigar store or club. After showing us everything about the premises, our escort finally capped the climax by announcing, "It's 4 o'clock. Ice cream is ready to be served." Now say, gentle reader, suppose you had been driving an ambulance for several months, practically day and night for weeks at a time, and that all you had known in the way of eats was the same old stuff day in and day out? And I ask you again, what would you say if suddenly you were invited to sit down beside a daintily covered table in a delightful courtyard, and found yourself confronted with a heaping big dish of real ice cream? Never mind your answer. You'd be found a hanging around the place at 4 o'clock every afternoon of your stay in Paris. That's what we did, and we were welcomed each time in that same cordial way. In the colder season, when it becomes too chilly for ice cream, the volunteer canteen workers of the Y.M.C.A. established a tea room, where at 4 p.m. hot coffee, chocolate, and such things as homemade doughnuts, cakes, and pies were served. This place did not go a begging for popularity, as may well be surmised, for it was filled to capacity every day. It would be unjust to create the impression that the popularity of the American Y.M.C.A. is due to the fact that it serves good ice cream. That was only one of the many things that hit the right spot. The biggest attraction, to my mind, was the spirit of sterling good fellowship which permeated the institution. The welcome was sincere. There was no snobbishness, no attitude of "look what we're doing for these fellows. Shouldn't they be most awfully thankful?" There wasn't a bit of that. On the other hand, there was plenty of "there's nothing too good for you boys who are doing the job out there. We're going to serve you." That is the attitude of the big-minded business men who have thrown open the doors of this institution in order that the boys from "out there" might have comfort when on furlough in Paris. It was a big thought, and it has kept many a youngster from going to the devil in that same big city. Before I left France, the Y.M.C.A. was making big strides in the establishment of huts and canteens along the front, also around the villages where the divisions of the army go for rest. Here the men at the front can have an opportunity to purchase food and supplies. This in itself is a wonderful blessing, for in the devastated towns along the front it is impossible to buy anything. Imagine the undying impression a man will retain of this wonderful organization when he recalls the day he was sent to the rear, drilled by a Boche bullet and dragging one foot after the other through the mud and water of the trenches, chilled to the bone, as he turned a corner and found tucked away in a hole in a wall a man who handed him a cup of steaming hot coffee; or when that same man lies on a hospital cot in the rear, recovering, there comes a representative of the same wonderful institution with words of cheer and consolation. Such is the work that these men are doing, and such the wonderful contribution to humanity it has proved to be. While in London I spent most of my time at the Y.M.C.A. huts. There they serve regular meals at a maximum cost of 14 cents, which consist of soup, meat, potatoes, vegetables, bread, butter, dessert, and coffee. It is open to any of the men of the Allied armies. I was particularly attracted one day to a group of boys sitting around a piano in the recreation room, singing and playing. An American soldier played the piano, an American sailor played a violin, a Canadian a banjo, and an Englishman a mandolin. The choir was composed of a Belgian, a Scotch Highlander, an Irishman, a New Zealander, an Australian, and a Frenchman, with a dozen Americans thrown in. I inquired of one of our sailors how he liked London. He replied, "Well, as much as I've seen of it, it's fine, but we boys spend most of the time right here at this piano." I found this to be true, for no matter what time I would go there, the same crowd was always present, and the room filled with blue smoke thick enough to choke a Chinaman. The facts set forth are my only experiences with the Y.M.C.A., but let me commend to everyone the wonderful work that this organization is doing, for if anything can hearten a man when he is away from all that is near and dear to him, it is the attention paid him by big-minded, big-hearted men who carry on the field work of the Y.M.C.A. No one preaches to you when you are under its roof, but there creeps into one's heart a new feeling that one longs to hold on to. I'm for the Y.M.C.A. strong. End of chapter 24.